Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2026 Engagement Lounge webinar series presented by the Association of Neurovascular Clinicians. My name is Rhonda Finney, and I will be moderating this session, Application of ANVC Stroke Coordinator Toolkit in Practice. ANVC is dedicated to the creation of seamless neurovascular care services led by evidence-empowered clinicians that fully support the holistic needs of patients and their families because stroke patients deserve nothing less. For more information about ANVC, please go to www.anvc.org. We do have a few housekeeping items before we begin. The session will be recorded and made available in the members only section of our ANVC website. You will receive an evaluation from Arizona State University. After completing and submitting the evaluation, participating viewers will receive a continuing education certificate, but again, you must attend the entire live session to be eligible to receive credit. If you are joining the webinar today under a phone number or a nickname, please enter your name and your email in the chat to ensure that you receive your evaluation to obtain your CE credit. And please feel free to enter any comments or questions into the chat throughout the presentation. And at the very end, we will review the questions with our guest speaker. I'm proud to introduce our guest speaker for this webinar, Morgan Boyer. I've known Morgan for several years now, and she's an experienced neuroscience critical care nurse, currently at Penn State Health and Lehigh Valley Health Network. She's also worked as a stroke data manager, a clinical program coordinator for stroke and sepsis. She's been a member of ANVC's education committee and actually led the task force that developed this important work, the Stroke Coordinator Toolkit. So there is no one better to talk about this toolkit than you, Morgan. So I'm really happy to have you here, and thank you so much. I will turn the floor over to you. Before I do want to say that Morgan has no disclosures or conflicts of interest to disclose. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you, Rhonda. That was a wonderful introduction. I appreciate that. And thank you, ANVC, for allowing me to present this beautiful toolkit that we assembled for our members only. So thank you again for having me. All right, friends, let's dive right into it. Welcome to the webinar this afternoon. As stated, I do not have any disclosures, but I'm always open to opportunities, so send them my way. And these are our objectives for today. We're going to analyze the structure and the key focus areas of this stroke coordination resource, determine where the specific tools, templates, and guidance can be accessed. So we're going to give you a tour. We're going to evaluate sample policies, workflows, and performance improvement materials within this resource and see how they apply to your individual stroke program needs. And lastly, I would really like to see that this audience, these members here present today and those that look at this in the future, develop an action plan to apply at least one tool or strategy from the website to enhance their own stroke program operations, compliance, or quality outcomes. And I do want to put out there as a reminder as we walk through this toolkit, the resources and examples provided are not exhaustive. Please understand that these definitely are not exhaustive. We have a very large population that we serve, and you all have brilliant ideas and methodologies for solving the issues that you encounter. So anything that is available within the toolkit really does need to be tailored to your facility resources and your policy and current guidelines, et cetera, et cetera. So please understand that these are beautiful examples just to help get the ball rolling, maybe stimulate some thought processes, but definitely should not be used as what's the word I want to use there, as the standard. So they just give you somewhere to start, a jumping off point, let's say, right? So from there, I'm going to end my slideshow and we're going to jump into the toolkit itself. So we're going to jump into the website. So when you do log into ANVC as a member, and of course, the Stroke Coordinator Toolkit is available only for members only. So if you haven't become a member yet, I definitely encourage you to do so. For the cost and the access to education and resources is unparamount. You cannot find it anywhere else. Definitely encourage you to do so. So as we jump in and you log in, it takes you here to this landing page, and you can get to the toolkit several ways. But if you go through the members only tab at the banner up here, you'll see the toolkit is accessible here. But also, once you sign in, you'll find it in the banner over here on the right. So we're going to go ahead and click on the Stroke Coordinator Toolkit. And we're going to hit basically the table of contents for the toolkit. To give you some background, this toolkit was the brainchild of the Education Committee, and I think we're going back almost 6 years, roughly. We had a really talented Education Committee. It was still the very young committee. And I can't remember off the top, like who actually stimulated and thought of this. We had great people like Cesar Valesco and Sky Coote and Rhonda. We had so many great people on the committee. Any one of them came up with this. It definitely was not my idea. I just kind of took it and said, okay, we just got to get it going. But it was not actually my brainchild. But knowing as a stroke coordinator, we really wanted to create a platform that stroke coordinators, stroke program managers, directors, anyone could access to help support their programs without having to go through tons of forums, to not have to do email blasts to the different facilities in the region, to give them that one-stop shop location to access resources, information, talent, and really give novice coordinators a place to really have a way to structure their onboarding and their training and their knowledge. But also, this should serve as a resource for the most seasoned stroke coordinators and program managers out there. So we tried to make it fit that mold. That was the concept behind the toolkit. And I really hope that that's the product we created. I really do hope it serves that purpose. It actually, the first half of the toolkit was released 2 years ago at ANVC at the annual conference. And then for ISE, we had the rest of it launched. And then even after that, we had a task force that was created that even expanded it further. So we want to keep it fluid. The goal of this toolkit was for it to stay adaptive, because as we know, our programs adapt as well. The rules change, guidelines change, our certifying bodies change the rules, the medicine changes, the evidence changes. So this has to stay dynamic as well. So it remains in the hands of the Education Committee at this time, but it is a dynamic portal for us all to leverage. So as we go through this, I want you to keep in mind, if you're looking at it and you have ideas too of how you can contribute, that is the number one way to make this product better for everyone. We do have a forum here on ANVC where you can pose your questions and things like that. I don't see a ton of traffic in there. Unfortunately, that's a really good way to pose your question to the broad audience. But in some of those questions, you're going to find some of those answers within the toolkit. So don't forget to look in there as well. But if you have a suggestion, you have a resource you think you could add, or you have a chapter you'd like to talk about and maybe help create, all you have to do is email info@anvc.org. And I'll also show you within the toolkit how you would do that. There's another place where you can enter that information, because this only is as strong as we make it. We got to continue to evolve it. This is really the stepping off point for the in several decades to come. And we need your information. We need your ideas to help keep it current and also help others. So I hope everyone finds a way to contribute in some way. All right, so welcome again to the toolkit. When you get to the landing page, as I said, you're going to find the table of contents. We do have a total of ultimately 9 chapters. The last chapter is, again, how you can contribute your own content or pose a question to the committee about stuff that does exist on there already. You can hop in and jump into any particular topic you may be struggling with or where you want to start, but we tried to put it in an order that makes sense for someone who's green, that needs to kind of just learn the ropes, understand the basics of what being a stroke coordinator looks like. So we're going to literally just navigate chapter by chapter and just give you a little bit of an overview of what each one has to offer. So as we go in, we're going to hop into chapter 1 at certification. Again, just to navigate these chapters, you'll find you can also navigate through the top. As you move on, you don't necessarily have to go back to the table of contents to move on. You can navigate through the toolbar at the top. And as we go through, you'll also find you can also just move on to the next chapter at the bottom of the page. Each chapter is set up very similar with basically some content overview, some guidance, some recommendations in a narrative in the beginning. And at the bottom, you're going to find the actual resources, examples, templates that you may be able to leverage for your own program. So as we jump into certification or stroke program coordinator, we did provide a lot of hyperlinks as well. You'll find anything that's in orange is usually a link to something, as well as images will be a link to something. And being that certification is so dynamic, and as I already stated, the rules change and they make changes to their guidance. It doesn't make sense for us to put a lot of that stuff into print in these chapters. So we provide links to the source for you to go to and really find the information that you're looking for. Because again, it doesn't make sense for us to have it typed out here only to be outdated in a month. So we try to keep things generic, but with enough information to give you direction. I hope that makes sense. So as we talk about certification, we also wanted this to be more not just a United States type of resource. We want it to be an international resource. So our international partners here that are watching, if you have content and things that you think you can give us that will help your colleagues, again, send it our way. We will put it in. This was based on what we had at the time when we built this out. So, of course, when we look at certification, we talk about the top 3 that serve the United States. And again, you can click on them to get more information about how to get certified with these particular organizations. But we also included a beautiful link to the AHA's scientific statement, the ideal foundational requirements for stroke program development and growth, because where is a better place to start learning how to build out your program, what your program needs, than to read the scientific statement. So again, steering people to the nuts and bolts is going to be helpful. And we definitely recommend for any novice or experienced to just go back at it and look at this and see where your gaps may lie. Do that internal analysis. As we look at those resources at the bottom of this particular page in the certification chapter, we thought this made sense to put job descriptions in here. And this is a common one I would see in threads and email blasts is like, hey, do you have a job description? I am a CNS and I run my stroke program. What does that look like from a job description standpoint? Because do you have different qualifications? You might have different hats that you wear within your stroke program, more than just the management of that program. And so what does that job description look like? Just to make sure that you are covering all your bases, but also so your institution recognizes your important role. So we gave several different examples of different types of job descriptions you might find within a stroke program. Again, not an exhaustive list. There are going to be different hats. You might have a therapist that runs your stroke program. There's so many different things. A nurse practitioner, what does that look like? From a job description standpoint. So we gave a couple of examples here just as a jumping off point of some content that might be helpful as you're building out your stroke program. Moving on to the next chapter, we have program management. So what does it mean to be a stroke program coordinator or a stroke program manager, however that title may land? So in here, we do have, talk about how important your stroke program's clinical practice, order sets, policies, and protocols are rooted in evidence-based medicine. So the cornerstone of that program is adherence to our clinical practice guidelines. That is our mainstay, right? So we do provide links for where you want to start your search for what clinical practice guidelines you may want to integrate into your program. And then jump into what does it look like to write a policy or to review your existing policies and the types of policies that you might have. If you haven't seen already, I did do a webinar on policy writing that may be helpful for younger folks and experienced folks looking to figure out if their policies are adequate enough, or if they've been nailed for their policy in the past, this might be a place to start. But again, I steer you back to that webinar as well. But again, we try to give a little bit of a framework to help guide good policy writing and good policy review processes, including some content here from the Patient Safety and Quality Healthcare Organization. Again, hyperlink to that particular website to give really good guidance on how to refine those policies. And we also gave a nice table here from that very organization to, again, help frame some of your thought processes and maybe some of your arguments as to why you want to make some changes, but you're meeting some pushback from your team members. And then within this particular one, we do find some great resources in here. Again, some things you're going to find might be duplicative. You might find some of these resources in other chapters because they make sense in more than one place so that you don't have to hunt for them. But in this particular section, we gave, since this is about program management, we do have some example policies. We also have some example tools and maybe some algorithms, workflows that your system might need. These are the more common ones that we have seen health systems use. And we do try to provide them in different formats as well. Depending on your health system, you might have roadblocks as far as downloading content from other websites. So we tried to give you options from editable documents that you can just start, use as a template, and then refine on your own, to giving you the PDF. So you're going to find some variability in your access to some of these resources. That was some of the thought process behind that as well. And again, anything in orange is going to be something that you can click on and will give you some content. Chapter 3 is all about order sets, order sets, right? That's our bread and butter, and is how we standardize our care delivery. So this is a pretty hefty chapter. We give some examples within the order set chapter about some order sets you might expect to see. Again, not all inclusive and may not be all that applicable depending on your level of care and your resources at your institution. But it may stimulate some thought like, oh, maybe we should have that in a protocol or an order set just for easy deployment. Here's a place to start. Again, these are examples, not exhaustive, and they may also be a little bit different now depending on accessibility and the way the rules have changed. So we give some examples, and then as you move further down, we have, again, a lot of examples of what order sets might look like. Challenging to say is, they're going to look different whether you're depending on your medical record that you're using, but they hopefully, based on the samples we gave you, give you a little bit of because a lot of them are just snapshots, basically, of what these order sets look like within the EMR. So hopefully you're able to use them well enough to help guide yours, and maybe just check and see if you have any gaps within your own order set. Or maybe you don't have one, right? So we have we have an emergency department pediatric stroke alert order set. That might look different than your adult power plan or order set. We have an inpatient order set for stroke alerts. We have admission power plans or order sets. Your thrombolytic therapy, if you have an intracranial hemorrhage, whether it's subarach or interparenchymal order sets. We have reversal order sets, carotid intervention. We have all kinds of examples in here. We had so many great content entries for this one. And there's also miscellaneous order sets, things you may not have thought of. Maybe you need an order set if you use pupilometers and what that order set might look like, or is it one of those order sets embedded in an existing order set for admission? So there's lots of good options in here, especially when it comes to neurovascular, how hard they are scrutinized and how hard it is to gain compliance in those pre and post windows. So lots of great options within here to help get a good jumping off point for your own organization, especially for those systems that are just embarking on intervention and you want to figure out how to make that really run smoothly. Chapter 4 is all about thrombolytic therapy. right? And this was a fun chapter to write because we do try to give a nice narrative about the evolution of thrombolytic therapy. And again, you'll find a ton of hyperlinks within here right to these clinical trials that were used to drive our utilization of alteplase and now tenecteplase. And again, with the evolution of therapy, there's um, there's still some challenges with the conversion from alteplase to tenecteplase if you're still in that process. There's some good content in here to help bolster that argument and help you navigate that transition if you haven't done it already. But nonetheless, this will continue to serve as a good synopsis of why we're treating patients the way we are and why we're using the medications that we are and why one may be more preferable over another. And again, giving you resources, we do provide in here these are interesting post-intervention monitoring worksheets, right? So what is one of the top things we get nailed for during our annual surveys is compliance with vital signs and neurochecks, right? That's so fun. So there's a couple options here. You'll find them also dispersed throughout other chapters. Things that have been deployed by other health systems that help work on that compliance for self-auditing, for auditing post, retrospectively for our compliance. But there's tools in here that have proved true for some for some health systems in improving their compliance with such issues. So if you're still struggling with that yourself, check it out. There might be something in here that works for you. There's eligibility checklists, inclusion-exclusion criteria checklists that some institutions use. Maybe this is embedded within your EMR already, which I would expect many are. But you might also have a paper option that clinician can use to review face-to-face with the patient and or family member. So we got those options in there. And of course, an important piece of thrombolytic therapy is education. So we also included some educational resources in this chapter. You'll find that also in the education chapter. But in here, there's education for the patient and there's education resources for the staff. So this is a great place to jump off. What are you doing to manage this component of knowledge within your team members? Good place to start. And again, if you need a little more background to help educate your staff as to why we're doing what we're doing, pull up some of these resources, especially this comprehensive review article from the AHA. Great place just to, as a summary, and highlight some points and say, this is why we're doing it this way, guys. So they understand the why behind their how. So now we're moving into education. And as a stroke coordinator, you know that falls on a lot of our shoulders, that we provide a lot of the education to our pertinent staff or design that education in some way, shape, or form. So in this chapter, again, trying to focus on how do you make your education tailored to your audience, whether that audience is your staff, that audience is your community, your audience is EMS, whatever that might look like. It's the crux of this chapter is you need to tailor it and you need to make it relevant. And I think that's true of every certifying body, that's what they're looking for. So again, giving some guidance in here, the more common topics that everyone has to cover includes the NIH. So we do have some resources for the NIH stroke scaling here. And then we dive into what does it look like to do pre-hospital education, community education. We all have requirements for community outreach. How do you get into that? Not everyone has a great setup for that. I had a great marketing department, and I jumped in on existing stuff while creating my own. That's not always possible depending on your health system or how large your health system is. You may not have that. So how do you get active without that accessibility? We give some great tips for that. And a great place to start for community outreach is always going to be that community health needs assessment. It'll tell you where your weaknesses are without having to look it up yourself. You just pull that up out of your health system and say, where do I need to work? Where do my people need me? Great place to start. We do remind you when it comes to patient education, how you have to figure out how to also tailor that education for their current state. How, they've just experienced a traumatic event They have cognitive barriers, maybe they don't. You have family that's stressed. How do we tailor that education so that they're actually receiving that information and it doesn't end once they go home? One beautiful addition, and I really encourage anyone and everyone to check out the Australian Stroke Foundation. Thank you, Sky Coot, for this information. But in this small snippet here are 3 amazing resources that are free. Again, jump in and check them out. This Enable Me is a beautiful stroke survivor portal that gives tons of information and ways to connect stroke survivors. These particular places are riddled with free resources, and you'll be surprised that there are tons of free resources within the United States as well. And when I get to the community outreach chapter, we have more resources there and links to help support that mission. Within here, we do have some, again, patient education, staff education, some lesson plans, education plans, some sample education, thrombolytic education, thrombectomy education for the patient. We do have NIH in plain English, which is an important piece, how to do that particular exam in easy to understand language, right, for our patients that are struggling in a crisis. Stroke escape room. That's a lot of fun to do and works really well. A lot of good feedback on doing escape rooms during education days and things like that. Really cool way to do it. So there's an escape room template in here for you to follow. And then feedback tools are a great way to educate, give feedback on performance, let people know outcomes, whether it's EMS, your ER, your inpatient staff. Giving that full circle picture is really helpful in educating and reminding them that they're doing good things and they're making a difference. So there's some examples of feedback tools here that may be relevant to your program as well, if you're not already doing it. So check it out. Chapter 6, data management. That's what we also seem to spend probably 90% of our time doing, is managing our data. All right. And we know as stroke coordinators, that is an essential element for quality and continuous improvement of your stroke program. You can't do anything with your program to make it better without data. So what does that data management look like? So this is a pretty hefty chapter here, giving some guidance, especially for the novice, because having never done this, you have no idea the amount of legwork it takes to make a program run efficiently and how much time you spend in a chart. So this tries to give some framework to take it off in little bite-sized chunks and hopefully give some structure to what your data management system might look like. So again, we give links to Get With The Guidelines, for example, as an international registry that everyone is on top of in order to get awards, but also demonstrate that you're doing great things. So links to that, also the target stroke requirements. So you can click on this image to get to that information. And in this chapter, we did explain that you'll find samples of different stroke databases that you may reference for building your own program. If you don't have one, or you do have one, but you're just like, I don't really care for it, and I don't think it's working for me, see what else is out there. We got some great options below. But it's important to remember when you're managing the data for your program, it's what's your program's objective, right? So everyone, whether you're doing every 2-year surveys or you're doing annual surveys, you have to have objectives in mind. What are we tackling this time around? Or what didn't get finished, wasn't adequate, or didn't meet our goal that we need to maintain? And you want those objectives in place so that you know what your PI is centered around. And you don't want too many, right? If you have too many balls in the air, nothing gets done. So you need to focus on what is really going to be impactful at that time. And something else may just need a pin in it till next time. And maybe you exceed your expectations. You crush that objective and you can come back to that pinned item and say, all right, we're going to get a jump start on this one. Keeping that in mind, we try to give folks that framework that you need to start with a focus. What are we after? And one thing I definitely encourage is that you take your ideas after looking at your data and saying, where are our weaknesses? take that back to your team leaders and say, this is what I'm thinking. What objectives do we want to tackle this time around? And make it a team effort, because you're not going to get anywhere without the buy-in, right? What does that data collection look like? What does data prep look like? We try to give some framework and guidance there, because that's one of the harder things to learn, is what makes what is most meaningful and impactful way to share my data, and how often do they want to see the data, and in what format. And we're just setting it up on a Teams portal. I highly recommend Teams portals, or some kind of portal that anyone can access it at any time, whether it's a nurse manager for your ER, it's your nurse manager for your med surg unit, your stroke unit. Maybe it's your hospitalist medical director, maybe it's your ER medical director. They should be able to access this data, pull it up in their meetings as necessary, to keep their team members current as well. Definitely recommend some kind of portal for that. Teams works really well because you can create that accessible niche, and you'll be able to keep your stuff current on there. But there are lots of different options. Tableau is a great option if you have someone to help you build that out. Lots of different ways to get that done. So we try to give some guidance and recommendations there just to stimulate the thought process. Talk to your quality department, see what you do have available in your institution that you can leverage. You don't have to start over. So again, walking through, what does it look like to manage your data? As I stated, we do give some examples, and there's different, names for what we call these things. Dashboards are important. Here's a couple examples of DNV dashboards, Joint Commission dashboard, which again would be that thing that could live on that Teams page that your leadership can look at when they want to, that you just keep maintained. And that might be where you reference in your own, and monthly meetings, your quarterly meetings. That should be also the destination you're going to share your information. Different registries or warehouses that hold all your patient data, right? Because we know Get With the Guidelines is great, but again, it's limited to just the patients that code out stroke. But if you're in a small institution that maybe only serves 50 patients a year, and you end up with 10 at most in the registry, that doesn't give you a ton to work with when it comes to quality improvement. You really want to look at every patient you touch. So in that space, a registry makes sense, your own warehouse, where you're tracking those metrics from start to finish, because every one of those patients is an opportunity for improvement. So we give examples from the acute stroke ready all the way up to the comprehensive stroke center. So you have templates that span all the different measures. And it's important to remember when it comes to these registries and warehouses that you need to have it stored in a secure place, right? So that's one of the points that we make in this particular chapter is if you're keeping it on an Excel spreadsheet, that Excel spreadsheet should not be accessible from your desktop. You don't want to leave it there and save it there indefinitely, because if that laptop goes missing, that is all patient information that's easily accessible. Putting it on your shared drives, having it on a SharePoint, having it somewhere in the cloud space is preferred over hard copy in your own desktop. So find a safe place to keep information like that is something that we oftentimes don't think about, because you just want it really accessible because you're in it all the time. But it does need to be secure just for those reasons. This is protected health information. So keep that in mind when it comes to those particular warehouses or databases you may be managing. We provided a couple extra worksheets, we called them, things that might be used to do additional audits or might be used for PI. So again, you don't have to think of, well, what does this look like if I'm going to be doing a PI project behind vital signs and neurocheck compliance. Here are some example worksheets that have worked for other institutions that you might be able to leverage for yourself. That's the whole point. And you'll see as we've been navigating, we learned, what does it mean to be a certified program? What does it mean to collect data? What does it mean to do quality improvement? That's what we're going to talk about in chapter 7 is now you have this information. How do I do a PI project? So here we try to give, again, a lot of just generalized tips with links to how where you find more information about how to do good PI. We provided some great healthcare quality improvement tips. Again, this is a summary, bulleted point, 8 of them. But you want more information, you can go right to the source that this was pulled from. This is from the Harvard School of Public Health. Again, legitimate resource, good ideas. These were vetted by the committee and said, yeah, these are great. We like these. We're going to use those. Giving some framework on how to navigate that PI process, where to start. We give you some examples of how to figure out what is really the crux of the issue, that root cause analysis. We give some examples using a fishbone, the five whys tool reference. And I do implore that as a stroke coordinator, that again, you reach out to your quality department because they are going to have some template, some structure that they use as a organization for quality improvement, and you shouldn't be doing your own one-off. If they do an S-bar for quality improvement, you should be doing an S-bar for your quality improvement. If they do a PDSA, then you should be doing a PDSA. Whatever your health system uses or your hospital uses is what you should be modeling, and leverage your quality department and say, hey guys, I'm new to this. I'm doing my first quality project. This is my problem. We decided we're going to tackle this. Can you work with me? And oftentimes they will have someone that can just help guide you a little bit. They're not going to do it for you, but they can be someone you can bounce things off of and help you understand how to leverage the tool and how to use it correctly. So definitely take advantage of your quality department. Again, we try to emphasize that within this chapter and say, use your resources. You do have them. You just have to ask. If you don't have them, you can come back to us and say, guys, I'm struggling. Reach out, because there are lots of us on here that will be able to help you guide some of these different methodologies. We did put in here if you're running into barriers, and who doesn't, right? We all do. You have that one provider, it's just a sticking point and just won't participate, or is just always that naysayer. We give some guidance on some approaches to tackling some of those barriers. So we do walk through some examples of what that might look like. And at the bottom, we give, again, some examples of action plans, templates, yeah, and different worksheets. So again, check it out, because hopefully this should give you some ideas to make your PI successful. We do have a brief chapter on telestroke. So this one was a little simpler because there's not like a lot of work behind this necessarily anymore, because it is such an integral part of our standard of care. But especially for the novice stroke coordinator, we did want to have a little bit of content in there. And being that telestroke is such an important baby of mine from back in the day, I wanted to make sure there was at least a little something in there to help the stroke coordinator understand how it's utilized and why it's such an important part of their stroke program. And so we give the telestroke guidelines from the ATA, which are definitely older, but still hold true. And of course, the AHA has their own guidelines as well. So we did give some links in here and try to give some guidance as to what your telestroke model might look like. And the importance of a good contract is an important part of making your telestroke partnership viable, and also helps make your program successful, because that can be a real challenge, because oftentimes this is a third party partner in your stroke program management. And that third party partner has their own quality management, and you have your quality management. And you guys got to work together to excel your program ahead. So you got to have good feedback. Your contract does need to have good criteria for compliance, and someone has to be monitoring those data elements. It can't just be them, because they have limited data and not all the data might be accurate. Just keeping that in mind, depending on where they're pulling their information from. So telestroke is an important piece of your stroke program. We all know that. So this is here as a good overview as to how that fits into your system. and what it might mean for survey time as well. And as I mentioned earlier in the talk, this community outreach chapter was actually born from the task force that was put in charge to finalize and do the last finishing touches of this toolkit, and thought it was an awesome idea because we do have an obligation for this community outreach. So this is beyond the education chapter and goes into more detail about what it looks like to get out there and involve your community. We do walk through some key messages. Obviously, we know this is not all that different from your inpatient stroke education, but you're dealing with people that haven't experienced the event yet. So you want to really keep it short and sweet. We know that because the attention span is brief, but depending on your venue, you also may only have literally 30 seconds with someone. So how do you make it impactful? So we try to give some variability, some ideas of what it might look like to get out there in your community. And as I stated, if you don't have a marketing department that's already out there doing stuff for your health system, how do you get involved and become relevant within your community? And I know like Caesar, for example, has done some great presentations in the past about how to get involved in your churches. That's a great venue because that's a great meeting point for the community. Getting into the schools, as we know, that is a great way. And how many kids have identified stroke in their family members because as a result of having some kind of event in their school. So we give some framework, some ideas to stimulate the thought process. What does it look like to get involved? So we do have some core objectives. Our objective, of course, is raising awareness. We know that. But we give an outline for an outreach plan, right? So we know that stroke begins before the hospital. We are centered on reducing the disparities. We want to improve the access, and hit those areas that aren't getting the attention that they need. We want to support prevention. We want to meet our standards for certification. We want to build partnerships, something that's sustainable, that you become known. You walk in there and like, "Hi, Morgan," and they expect to see you at least a couple times a year, build that rapport. And empower survivors and families, get them involved, have them participate in some of these outreach events because they're embedded in the community already as well. So you might as well take advantage of them and also support their recovery. As I mentioned earlier, this chapter is really awesome for free resources. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can take what they're doing and you can pull it out, take their resources. You might be able to have flyers, different canned programs that you can take to a school, for example, or to an after-school program, take them to the YMCA, and do a great educational program that you don't have to create. You're taking it and you're applying it to your own community. This Hip Hop for Stroke is really cool. It's an age-appropriate music and dance platform. Stroke Ain't No Joke is one of the several free prevention and awareness campaigns available free of charge. So you just check out this website, see what they have to offer, see if you can't use it. It's a lot of fun and it works really well. Kind of a neat program. There's also refresh and retreat stroke camps. And even if you don't have a stroke survivor group, for example, support group, this is an interesting way to, especially because I don't know about you, but I tend to have built some relationships with some of my stroke patients during their stay and say, "Hey, listen, I'm going to follow up with you in a couple months. There's a camp in XYZ that you might want to consider down the line as a way to, again, connect with other stroke survivors." It's for the patient themselves, for their primary caregiver, and maybe some of their extended caregivers. It's a really cool way to get out there and know that they're not alone. We know that's a focus from a survivor standpoint. It gives a little bit of respite and a little bit of a therapy session for sure. Definitely recommend checking out the Refresh and Retreat stroke camps. They're all over the country. Definitely worth investigating and making that recommendation. Maybe you just want to get involved too. Great way, again, to build that rapport within your community. These are some great flyers from some of our colleagues of what it looks like to host a large event. Here, everyone loves that mega brain. If you could find a way to get someone to sponsor that mega brain, it's a cool way to stimulate conversation and drive people to your particular area of a different community event. A lot of us do these strikeout for stroke events at your minor league baseball parks and stuff. Great way to, again, get out there and celebrate a stroke survivor, throwing out the first pitch, to do different things like that. We have stroke survivor stories, raffles, giveaways, different ways just to get our survivors out there and, again, stimulate the prevention conversation. We give some examples, again, of outreach products that are out there, bingo cards. One thing that I is really proud of, and this was something fun that I thought of, my gosh, way back in the day as a newbie, where we did pin the stroke pin the stroke symptom on the brain. So I pin the tail on a donkey, right? From when we were, well, at least from when I was little. And so my original did not look this nice. My original I made myself. I took a canned, like, stock image of a brain, had it printed on a poster, picked it up at Staples, made my own Be Fast Velcro letters, laminated them. And what I did was, they're Velcro letters, and I had Velcro spots on the brain. And I said, okay, let's talk about Be Fast. With if somebody has balance and they're dizzy and they're having trouble walking and they're falling to one side or whatever that symptom, where does balance come from on the brain? And ask that person to pin the stroke symptom on the brain. Worked really great with EMS providers, especially at EMS conferences. We'd have it up, and you'd be surprised how many times they were like, "What? They would get it wrong," and they're like, "No, I thought I knew this." I'm like, "Well, what's important is you know the signs and symptoms because you're screening the patients. Now you know why you're seeing what you're seeing." So, fun game. Doesn't mean, again, homegrown, didn't cost a lot. When I was able to leverage my marketing department, was able to get something nicer, but it doesn't, just think outside of the box. Again, it's just a way to bring someone to your table, have a conversation, and make them think back to, oh, that's right. If I have double vision, that might be mean there's something going on back here. Again, just to stimulate that conversation. So just an idea. Maybe you use it, maybe you don't, but maybe it stimulates your own creative mind. But we try to give you some options, steer the conversation. And last but not least is that chapter 10. I told you this is another way that you can contribute. I'm on chapter 10. It doesn't really go. Okay, click that. There it goes. So how can you be a toolkit contributor? We did get some good ideas through this over the last couple of years. You can write your information in these fields and put in the topic you'd like to discuss, and a member of the education committee will follow up with you. Or take your idea and say, okay, this was a suggestion. Do we feel like this is something we can integrate somewhere? And maybe you just want to be part of it and you're like, I have an idea for a chapter. This could be useful. Again, we definitely want those resources. Share your information. We want those things to enhance our toolkit, because all you're doing is benefiting the stroke coordinator that's coming up behind you and the stroke coordinator that's in front of you. So please consider contributing to keep this toolkit dynamic and relevant for the decades to come. That is the nice overview. And look at that. Any questions?
Morgan, this was really great. I mean, this was a really great overview, and I appreciate you going through it and talking through it, because when you get a toolkit, particularly if you're a novice stroke coordinator, this can be very daunting to go through 9 chapters of stuff. So I appreciate that a whole lot. I do want to ask a couple of questions. We have the neurovascular nursing scope and standards that was co-written by the American Nurses Association and by ANVC in 2023 to really define the role of the stroke coordinator. So that may be, as I'm sitting here looking through it, that may be one thing to add. If you're wondering what your job description should really include in that, the scope and standards for nurses who are stroke coordinators, and maybe as a model for other professionals who are also stroke coordinators, those competencies are in the scope and standards. and it's published by the American Nurses Association at nursingworld.org, or you can just Google neurovascular scope and standards. So I just wanted to throw that out there
Mhm.
because that really is the definition for the practice. And we defined the stroke coordinator because there was no real definition.
Mhm.
And Morgan, I think you were in that process with us as we were discussing all of that as well. So I
Yeah,
just want
that's
to
an
put that out to the
mhm.
attendees and just make sure that they know that.
Yes, that's an excellent point. Yeah, very much. That definitely need to go there. If you don't already have it, I'm like, oh, where's my copy? I have my copy. But
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So get a copy, order it online. You get it from not us, you get it from the American Nurses Association, and that will help you define those competencies, particularly if you're trying to really elevate the role of the coordinator out of the data abstraction and so forth, where you can really be the leader in the program, I think.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, well spoken. That's on point. Thank you, Rhonda.
Yeah, you're welcome. Morgan, how do you handle the 2026 updates when you are a stroke coordinator and they come out in force all at one time? What is your best advice how to handle them in the United States versus other countries who have living guidelines, like Australia has living guidelines? So they come out a little bit at a time. It's a little bit easier
Yeah.
to digest and change processes. What is your process when we get new guidelines?
Oh, that is a tough one. Yeah. So personally, what I would do is tackle looking at those guidelines. Where am I falling short? Where am I when what do I actually need to affect in a change state? And then what is going to be the most time sensitive? What is going to be most impactful on the outcomes of my patient? And I usually tackle those first because you can't do them all at once. It's gonna be too much change that people are gonna lose what's actually happening. They're not going to realize what's changed and link everything together. They're going to lose some context. So there's the only way I would know how to do it is to do it in small chunks because while we want to do it all at once, it's not going to work well if there's going to be some bigger adaptations that are necessary. So I would want to handle the things that are going to have the biggest impact on the outcomes of my patient first and pick whatever. I still wouldn't do, six at a time. I would probably do one or two of those things and try to tackle something every quarter and adapting those guidelines into my practice if they aren't already in place. That's how I would approach it. But again, my model may not work for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. It is a little bit daunting when you have
Yeah.
big, thick upgrades. I do like the now that they're putting the 10 takeaways and they're starting to sort of identify the fact that we need to prioritize those for people.
Yes.
So that's a real improvement in
Mhm.
terms of that. What is your favorite chapter, Morgan, in this toolkit?
Mm, my favorite chapter. Ooh, it's probably, well, because I was such a data nerd, it's probably my data management chapter. I mean, because that is where I really affected change in my program was with the data. So that's probably where I found my most joy is trying to help others figure out how to get that data to work for them. So that's probably one of my most favorite chapters, followed by the community outreach chapter, because I'm like, there's so much out there to help people that is free, that are free resources, and especially that Hip Hop for Stroke. I can't implore enough people to try it out because it's a really cool way to get to your younger population. It doesn't always have to be your younger population. You throw that out there for everyone. It's just a good time, and it's a great way to learn. So that community outreach chapter was also a lot of fun to put together.
Yeah, I did like I did like the community outreach chapter as well. I mean, we've done schools and high schools and junior high, and we have allied health programs that incorporate our high school students. And so, anyway, so those are so much fun to do as a team. So,
Hmm.
so I totally agree with you, and I'm glad you put those in here.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions? Morgan, this was fantastic.
Good.
Again, make sure that if you are calling in, make sure that we have your name and your email so that we can send you the evaluation so that you can get your continuing education. But Morgan, this was fantastic. Thank you for spending an hour with us. And I
Thank you
hope
for
you have a
having
good
me.
rest of your day. Yeah, I hope
You
everyone
too.
has a great day. And we will see you next time.
Thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.